Hello and welcome to another episode of the Juan on Juan podcast. I'm your host, Juan. Today we are joined again by Luke Williamson, and today's episode went pretty deep. Probably one of my favorite episodes to date. We really dove into the different aspects of ayahuasca ceremonies and what's attributed to that and how that experience was for Luke on his many ayahuasca experiences. He talks about some of the trips that he went on while on ayahuasca and while on different types of DMT and different types of psychedelics and what that was like for him and what he learned from that. And this episode, he told me some stuff that I wasn't even prepared for, and I was like, what? It just really, really blew my mind. And we also go into some experiences in his life as well that he's had. But yeah, we talk about DMT entities and the things you can see on these psychedelics, which is crazy, crazy heavy stuff. So without further ado, this is DMT entities, psychedelic journeys, and other dimensions with Luke Williamson. We'll get into your story of you had a kidnapping story in Egypt. What was that about?
I did get kidnapped in Egypt, and
were you a grown-ass man or were you a kid?
No, I was a kid, and I talked last time very briefly about the first time I went to Egypt. I was 6, and my mom was making a movie there, so we got to go over and spend some time there. And I think actually in the first, I was listening back to make sure I didn't screw up anything too badly, and I think I said we were there for 6 months, but we were actually there for 6 weeks. So I think that was the big mistake I made last time. Anyway, so we were there for 6 weeks, and it was a really life-changing experience. And my mom was a great mom, but she was pretty free. Like I was sort of trusted to, run my own show a little bit, and she was really busy. But anyway, there were people who were I had an au pair who was supposed to look after me, but I think she was kind of having a thing with the first assistant director, and she wasn't entirely, she was like 18, she was just having a great time. And so I just sort of, did my own thing. And one day, this Egyptian gentleman said, oh, it's my turn to look after you today. And so I was 6. I was like, oh, okay. So we went to his house. Like I ate with his family. I played soccer with like the local kids and stuff. And then like around 6 o'clock, this car full of like stuntmen and grips from the movie showed up and grabbed me and stuffed me in a car and, drove me away. And it turned out that he wasn't, of course, supposed to look after me. He had become convinced that my mother was the reincarnation of Nefertiti.
What?
And he had to meet her. I don't know. Maybe this is a standard Egyptian guy move. I don't know. But
what god is that? Is that like a goddess or something?
Yeah, Nefertiti was Akhenaten's wife, and she is renowned as being one of the most beautiful women in Egyptian history. And Nefer itself means beautiful. Yeah, so I spent the day with the guy. I had no problems. It wasn't a bad day for me. But after that, like, there was a stunt guy who's like assigned to like watch over me for like the rest of the trip and whatever. So yeah, it was actually, but Egypt is in a lot of ways, it's really a very sweet place. It's kind of, I think it's very safe compared to a lot of other places. And we also had a taxi driver called Mahmoud who drove this old, I don't know what it was, made in the 50s. And he started with a screwdriver. He called it the Tutankhamun, this car. And it broke down in the desert one time. And we just had like the one bottle of water, and he's out under the hood. And I'm like, man, we're not going to last long with one bottle of water. But it's great. A lot of the Egyptians just are very welcoming. They welcome you in. And
I'm glad it hasn't been war torn. Because if I'm not mistaken, I think Hitler rolled through there, no? Through Egypt?
I think a lot of people have rolled through there. I think it was really Mussolini. I think Rommel got sent to help out the Italians because the Italians were terrible. I think they were just kind of losing across the board, and Hitler had to divert a lot of forces down in North Africa. But I don't know how much was going on in Egypt. I don't really know. I do know that apparently Napoleon Bonaparte, he had his troops in Cairo, and because it was that Muslim country, there's no alcohol, So after a couple of weeks, his troops discovered hash, and they were all like so stoned, high as fuck, that they wouldn't listen to any orders or anything, and they were all just becoming hippies. And
It's like
Napoleon
that
was going
stuff.
insane, so he had a bunch of alcohol shipped in and forbade them to smoke hash, and they just all, instead of just being stoned, now they were drunk and stoned. They didn't want to stop smoking. It's a funny story, apparently quite true.
It's like the stuff that have you ever heard of mad honey?
Oh, that's the stuff they make with the bees on like either herb or kratom or something, where they take from the.
Yeah, so I got some. It's from Nepal, and it's these bees that they pollinate this toxic flower, and when they come back to make the honey, that toxin is, I forgot the name of it, within the honey itself. So they harvest it when these flowers are blooming, during the season. And the honey, it's a toxin, but it's got hallucinogenic effects and stuff like that. And they call it mad honey. And there was some stories like that where these invading armies or whatever, they would roll through and they would start eating the honey, and it's delicious. I haven't tried it, but it's delicious. So they're
That's
like,
the end of the invasion.
yeah, so they start eating it, and they eat so much that it actually would make them sick and like paralyze them, because like apparently it just like messes you up. You're only supposed to take like 1 teaspoon every 48 hours or some crazy shit. And so yeah, it's really strong. And so they would that would happen to them. That would be it. They would get slaughtered because they'd be so stoned or whatever.
That's really funny.
Yeah, so yeah, that's incredible. And then obviously we talked last time you were on. We talked about I wanted to talk about that today too, because you're wanting to do some research as far as, and we talked about your DMT trip and entities. And I've been recently looking up, obviously, I talk about theology and stuff on here. Yesterday I had a guy on and we talked about angelology, demonology, the book of Enoch and stuff like that. And I've been looking more and more into psychedelics, and people are saying how, again, and this is depending on what your belief is to begin with, usually that'll paint the picture of what you can imagine and where your imagination can go to a certain extent. So there's people saying that when you do psychedelics, because obviously the Egyptians and a lot of these ancient cultures use psychedelics on a regular basis for ceremonial purposes. And it's funny because I just seen a meme before I came on. It was that change my mind meme, and then I had photoshopped Jesus's face on the guy's face, and it said the Bible is only the first documented psychedelic trips or something like that. Changed my mind.
Yeah, it's like supposedly a mushroom cult, right?
Yeah, exactly. Then obviously you have John Marco Allegro that talks about how Jesus could have been a mushroom, and it's just this Christian myth, whatever.
Well,
you can look at
there's a lot of talk now about how Moses' experience, with the burning bush.
Yeah, with the acacia. Yeah, it's high in DMT.
It's a DMT. It sounds like a DMT high to me. It sounds like a DMT experience.
Yeah, again, and I mean, you've had your experiences with these entities, but then people say that they can be demonic or whatever. But then the people I've spoken to, yes, there are the demonic feeling type entities that they encounter in this other realm, whatever it may be, and then obviously you have the nice ones, the malevolent, the benevolent.
You also shouldn't be you shouldn't buy too much into how they look either, because I've seen a couple of truly terrifying looking entities who were not terrifying at all. Like their aspect was frightening to us, but they actually had very good. There's one. He's the I think his name is Barong. He's like the lord of the spirits in the host of good or something like this. It's like Indonesian
mythology.
Yeah. And I was not aware of Barong. Maybe it's Batong, Barong, something like that. And I was in an ayahuasca session, and I was like in a bubble, and this head poked in, and I don't know if you've ever seen like been in a butcher shop and you've seen like the head of a sheep, in the display case that has like been defleshed, so it's like all that white bone with just like a little bit of red flesh here and there, and the eyes are still in it. And this is apart from like the big tusks in the side of his mouth and stuff. That is the appearance that this, like when you see it carved in wood that I've seen later, it doesn't look as, like dead animal headish as it like did when I actually saw the thing. But it poked its head into the sphere, and it looked terrifying. But I wasn't frightened at all, and it just sort of looked around, looked at me, and then it just like the head pulled back out of the space. And it, like, there was not a bad feeling at all. Like I wasn't, like my heart rate didn't raise at all. And then it took me like 2 years to actually see that face again somewhere. And I'm like, oh my God, that's the thing. Lord of the hosts of good. I'm like, yeah, okay. So the good vibes coming off that was,
Yeah. And we talked about DMT and psychedelics last episode. And obviously you mentioned your ayahuasca. I didn't really ask you. Obviously, we talked about the purging and how they would have these certain songs that would make everybody purge, because depending on who it was, the plants were telling them different songs, so they each change.
Yeah,
so, yeah, can you talk about what it is to be on ayahuasca, like your experience as far as, because obviously that's, DMT smoking it is 15, 20 minutes, is 8 hours.
So basically, to break it down, for those who don't know anything about it, without boring people who do know stuff about it, the ayahuasca vine has very small amounts of DMT in it, really, really minute amounts of DMT, but it has that MAO inhibitor in it. So when you combine it with specific other plants that have a high DMT content, it allows those admixtures, as they're called, to cross the blood-brain barrier, and then you feel the effects. And so ayahuasca is really the great enabler. It's the umbrella that will hold these other plant medicines. And many tribes use different, depending on where they at, where the region. In Peru, it's primarily chacruna is the plant that's used, and the place I was at, we had three things in addition to the ayahuasca that went in there. One was wambisa, one was chacruna, and the other was something called oheyage. And like the shaman there was like, this is because one of the names for ayahuasca is yage, but this is oheyage. But I've had other people, no, that's ayahuasca. I'm like, okay, argue with my shaman. So anyway, those are the things that go in there, and then it's very different from smoking DMT, or if you do the correct dosage of smoked DMT, you leave your body, you're out, and there's a couple different kinds of DMT, and the bufo is the 5-MeO, and it's got an extra compound in it.
You've never tried that one, right?
Yes, I have done the toad. Maybe 12 or 13 times, whereas I've only done the NN-DMT once.
Yeah, you said you tried the other one time. You tried the toad 13 times. The other one just one time.
Toad is like 12 or 13 times probably, and then the NN just once. But NN-DMT is, it's so active, and you're so there. And like I was saying last time, there's usually entities. They're aware of you. They want to interact with you. There's really interesting stuff going on. But if you do the dose correctly, which is usually like 3 lungfuls, you leave your body. You're somewhere else, and you're not in your body at all. I didn't quite hit that point with the NN-DMT. I was still in my body in that one experience I had, even though I experienced all that interesting stuff. However, with the NN-DMT, like I don't remain in my body, but it's non-dual. You are the only entity. You are every entity. You are everything. You are nothing. And it's beautiful. It's really, it's terrifying until you get to that point. And then it's the most beautiful experience you've ever had. And it's total release. It's total release of all that stress and pressure and tension. And for me, that's what it's been every time since my breakthrough. It's just been complete, total release. I white out a lot. I just evaporate and, become nothing and everything. And what's really interesting is that even now explaining to you, I don't adequately understand what the experience feels like until you're back in it, experiencing it. You can't no words could ever explain it. I mean, I could sit here all day and you'd be like, I have a pretty good idea of what this is going to be. And then you would experience it and you'd be like, there's nothing that could prepare me for that. Nothing.
Yeah. That's
And
what's scary about it too.
it is. I mean, it was absolute because it took me, I think I smoked 4 times before I broke through, before I left my body. And I was like being pressed against, the source, against, like, it was very uncomfortable. Like, I really didn't like it. I felt miserable. It was a horrible experience. And then I broke through and it was just, everything was worth it for that. And that has helped me as far as like depression and understanding of like the human condition. I think Toad has helped me more than anything else I've ever done in my life. But I think everything else kind of set the table for it, sort of prepared me for it, got me to that point. And I am going to go down in May to Peru and do another set of ayahuasca sessions because it's been 3 years now.
Wow, and, that's something.
So but it's very different because you're with ayahuasca. With the DMTs, you tend to leave your body when you smoke. If you do it right, you will leave your body. You won't be aware of your body. And in the NN-DMT, you'll be aware of all this other stuff, but not your body. And with ayahuasca, you're very much in your body, dealing with your body, cleaning your body. Your body, the first, I would recommend not just going for one ayahuasca session. I'm going to go do ayahuasca because very often the first 1 or 2 sessions, even maybe 3 sessions, are just cleaning your body out, preparing you to be at the place where the medicine's really going to affect you. And then that's when you start getting the teachings. For me, that's how it worked. It wasn't till the first 2 were pretty horrific, and then the 3rd and 4th were just beautiful.
But just like throwing up and just diarrhea, just
yeah. I mean, it's
by horrible.
I mean, sometimes you have diarrhea. A lot of people worry about that. And it's never pleasant when you're inebriated in some way to have to deal with that. But it's part of the deal. And once your body cleans out a little bit, then that stuff tends to lessen. I very much by like the 3rd session, like my purges become like spit offerings. Like I have my bowl and they play the cleaning Icaro, and I'm not really vomiting. It's a little bit of spit, goes in the bucket or whatever. It's rough. Look, a lot of people fixate on the vomiting or the purging, but it's a really good thing for your body to actually go through that.
I don't know, man. I hate it, Luke.
I don't like it. In fact, to be honest, I don't really like either the ayahuasca or the DMT experiences while I'm having them. There's something innately disconcerting about that space when you're in it. And you think of all the visual stuff and you're like, gosh, this is amazing. And you see, representations of the visuals and you're like, gosh, I really want that. And gosh, how amazing would it be to see all this stuff? But when you're in that space and you're experiencing it, how your body is feeling and where you are, like inside the vessel, and it's almost like you're kind of being shoehorned out a little bit. And it's a very odd feeling. And it can be frightening and disconcerting for people. It's an odd space. And I tend to not enjoy it very much when I'm in it, but afterwards, like I get a lot of benefit from it.
So it's more of like a body type thing. You still see the fractals and stuff.
There's a lot more body, and what any shaman worth his salt will tell you is that it's not about the visuals. You're there, the visuals are cool, and sometimes you see really interesting stuff, and sometimes it's pertinent and important, but really. The other thing the shamans will usually tell you is that, the medicine actually isn't in the cup. The medicine's in you. The ayahuasca is going to help you get to the point where you can approach, those issues that you have, and you can like start working on that. It's just really, it's like starting the process inside you. And now some places do add things. There's a plant called toei. And some places add toei because it gives incredible visuals. And they think that's what, and a lot of people, they think that's what the gringos come for. Sometimes they come for the really incredible, they want to see the trippy shit. Like they want to go to a Pink Floyd concert in their head. And so they'll put toei or something else in it. And you end up sometimes having people having really adverse reactions. This, I think it's scopolamine, which is in Toei, which can cause the heart to stop, can cause breathing problems. Most of like the ayahuasca, the chacruna, the wombi, that stuff is not going to do any of that to you. You just have to, be able to hold your space. But there are other admixtures that will make stuff really incredible, that can cause some issues. So I on the other hand, like, you're probably going to end up seeing some incredible stuff anyway. And I think I was talking last time, Icaros, they're songs, but you can see sound, when you're
on
in,
DMT.
when you're in the right state for it. And there are definitely shamans that compete as to who has the best looking, songs. And, just take a minute to appreciate that, because that's pretty incredible. And, anyway,
But you still see these entities as well on ayahuasca, right?
I have seen entities. The entity that I'm aware of most people being in contact with during ayahuasca sessions is I've identified as something called a Tumi, Tumi. And if you look that up, you'll find a little guy with a pretty cool headdress. And he's usually standing on what looks like the blade of a shovel. It's a little sort of semicircular blade. And anthropologists and archaeologists have been telling us for years that these are the sacrificial blades they used to cut the hearts out of sacrifice victims. So I was always like, ooh, to me, like dirty. Like, I don't want anything to do with that.
Yeah.
And the first...
Is that like a little... this is like a deity, right? Like a...
They're spirits. I believe they're like spirit entities. And but that's not how archaeologists see them. Of course, this is just like a tool that was used to cut out hearts.
Yeah, see, it's like a blade, like a shovel.
Yeah, this is the thing they put on the top of it. And when I was in, I saw like the headdress of one night. But the next day, I went to the dining maloka, and one of the guys from our group was sitting there drawing. And so I sat down, I got some limonata, and I was like, what are you drawing? And he's like, oh, I have this entity I saw last night. And I said, oh, really? And he said, yeah, can I see it? And he showed it to me. He'd only drawn the top half. And I'm like, that's a Tumi. And he said, a what? And I'm like, that's a Tumi. And I'm like looking for like a picture of this thing. And he'd only drawn the top half. And I'm like, was it standing on did it have like a semicircular? He goes, oh yeah, no, he said it had this semicircular blade, but he was pushing it into my stomach, and it hurt. But he was doing something in there, and I understood that it was really important that he was doing whatever he was doing in there, but it kind of hurt. And I was like, yeah, that's a Tumi. And then I've had that happen 2 other times where people have described this thing, and I've showed them a picture of a Tumi, and they're like, yeah, no, it was this. And so I started asking indigenous people about the Tumi, and a lot of them, they refer to them as doctorcitas, like the little doctors. And I think, we've identified them as a sacrificial object. And really, these are like the spirit doctors that come and work on people in ayahuasca sessions. That's my theory.
That's so crazy.
It's crazy. And it's like not even the stuff I've seen. I'm identifying what other people have seen. And they're absolutely 100% solid that that's what they saw.
What other entities have you, because I know you're researching that, have you found that people have also seen similar to this, that you've seen, that they've seen, that you've been able to identify? Well,
a lot of people, I haven't seen them in this form as such, but a lot of people see aliens. And it actually has kind of made me think that perhaps aliens are not extraterrestrial, but maybe extra dimensional in some way. Mm-hmm. But a lot of people, there's one... And this girl, she was quite amazing. She came down. This is my first ayahuasca experience. And, I had a background in mushrooms and LSD, and I wasn't worried. I mean, I was still nervous. I mean, I knew I could handle myself, but there's something new. I'd had a DMT experience, and I was like, what is this going to be like? And so I was nervous. This girl had never even smoked a joint. And somehow she had found herself like in the middle of the Amazon jungle, about to drink ayahuasca.
Those gringos.
And yeah, and so we had that was 4 sessions we had there. And after the 3rd session, she refused to do any more because she's like, every single session I'm on the mothership with the aliens, and I don't know why, and I don't want to be there, and it's not like they're unpleasant, but I don't understand like why I am with the aliens in their ship. And it's like she sat out the fourth one. She didn't want to go back. Like every single one was about that. There was another girl who was she was next to me in the Maloka, and I was hearing these really weird dripping sounds during the session. And it turned out that she was speaking to aliens in their own language, and it was this drip language. And it was really, she was telling me about it later, and I was like, my God, is that what that weird dripping like sound was that I was like, and so there's been some, I also saw like in a session, I saw like a monkey type entity like squatting over a person in the Maloka, which is really weird. I've also been there where other people have seen things that have terrified them and have like needed the shaman to come and try to clear some stuff.
Did you say that before, Luke? That you've seen people squatting over? Like you've seen them?
I saw like a shadowy figure that looked like a monkey person, kind of like a Hanuman or something that was crouching over somebody, just like rubbing their shoulder. Wow. And what's really interesting with the DMT experience is it's very South American and it's very Indian. A lot of Indian stuff creeps into, like, I mean, Asian Indian creeps into the DMT zone. And so I think there's a real connection in that other place between the South American ancient cultures and the Indian cultures. And when you start looking, through, all the Indian histories, the Upanishads and the Vedas and Mahabharata and all this kind of stuff, it's absolutely filled with large blue entities. Yeah. It's Shiva, Vishnu, and so is Egypt. I mean, Ptah was blue. There's a lot of stuff going on that until you're in that place and you see that, you don't make that connection. I also made a connection very early on with DMT with the Mayan and Aztec art style. It always looked really cartoony and weird. Like, I'm like, that is so weird. That doesn't look like. And then I took DMT and I was like, oh.
Have you seen those buildings over? I think it's over in the Middle East. Though the ceilings, I forgot the name of it. And
they're all like. Yeah, it's all like that sort of multicolored fractal.
Incredible.
Yeah, absolutely.
It looks so trippy.
So either they're getting there in the visionary state, meditation, or or there's something else they're using, because that's the type of stuff you see.
Yeah, exactly. And like I told you last time, I have friends who have the Alex Gray poster up. Yeah. I have friends who won't touch it, won't go with the DMT because they're terrified of it. And then I have other friends who love it. And they're like, yeah, it's amazing. And it's like you said, some people they get freaked out. And
friends who
you think it's really that other realm
in that space, and they're absolutely terrified of it, and they still do it, but they're terrified of it. The guy who introduced me to it had a lot of experiences, and for him, he, like that day I told you about, like on the Hancock tour, he smoked after me, and he had a terrifying experience. But I've had very difficult experiences with ayahuasca where it's been hard, but I've never been terrified. And I mean, knock on wood, but I tend to look at, I think I said this to you last time after we finished, I look at ayahuasca a lot like, it's a little bit like Empire Strikes Back when Luke goes to Dagobah. Okay, so you go really far away, you find this shaman who lives out in the middle of the jungle he's got serpents around his neck, he feeds you like this foul tasting stew. And then, and he talks to you about things, feeling the energy between all these things. And then, like, as you start to become aware of this, you find this other place and, the cave. And it's, like, okay, so go in the cave. All right.
Yoda was on some shit.
Yeah. And Yoda's like, you don't need your weapons. And he's like, well, what's in there? He's like, only what you take with you. And so he goes in there and he sees his greatest enemy, and he kills his greatest enemy, and it's himself. Mm-hmm. And that, to me, in a lot of ways, is what people experience in an ayahuasca, experience. And a lot of what you experience, I think most everything on these things, there's nothing that's in there that you're not taking in with you. And that's been my experience. I've never I've never found I think don't be afraid of yourself. Go in, embrace the experience, surrender to it, and just try to relax as much as possible. And make sure you're doing it with right people. I mean, there's a lot of these Facebook groups, the ayahuasca. There's a lot of guys who spend a lot of time in that group trying to persuade you that the tradition's stupid. Be your own shaman. Don't have any structure to it. Just make it at home. Do this, do that, and maybe for some people that's good. But I think for me, I find great comfort, and I feel really good in the traditional native setting. I feel protected. I feel comfortable. It feels exotic as well. And I feel really in the right place. I feel separated from all the shit that's worrying me. And so that's how, I tried to do, I did do an ayahuasca session in the United States, and it was horrible. And I'm so glad that wasn't the only one or my first one.
You saw civil war.
No, it was like a hippie drum circle. There was no respect for other people's space. People brought their dogs. They were smoking pot and eating and talking and coming over and rubbing other people and and I'm like, this is not like, you need to have your sacred space and prepare it, and everybody respects other. Man, if I could have gotten in my car and driven home, I would have.
Yeah, and again, that's when people lose respect for it, because again, it's stuff given to us from nature, and it should be. And we talked about this, I think, after the show about recreational marijuana use. There's a time and place for it, but if you go to a concert and you're tripping your balls off, what are you getting out of that experience? Because it's used for that. It's used for expanding your consciousness, and we can push this into our next topic. Of like these being in like another realm, another dimension, whatever you want to call it.
I think that stuff, what you're just talking about, though, I think in a lot of ways everybody has to start somewhere, and a lot of people that start, they're young. And so it's something interesting. It's fun to do. And so, you'll go to a concert and eat some mushrooms. And then after a while, you're like, oh, actually, I want to go out in nature and eat.
Yeah.
That. And then you're like, oh, actually, I kind of want to be by myself and have like this, whatever it is. And then if you get there eventually, I think.
You see Mother Nature breathing finally when you do that and look around and see it. And what you had mentioned to me, I think, you mentioned two things to me that when you texted me that I didn't know what the fuck they meant, and I wanted to ask you,
sure,
being everything and being nothing simultaneously.
Sure. Well, it's a very Toad thing, and what you find is that we live in this world of like dual dichotomies where the opposites can be true at the same time. And if you've ever seen like that diagram of like the way the shadow casts on something, it looks like a square from one side and a circle from the other. And it's one person sees it as a square, and another person sees it's that sort of thing. And every time I come back from a Toad experience, I'm struck by like that seemingly incompatible reality where opposites are true at the same time. And so that Toad space that I was talking about earlier, and when you have to take sort of these little sips, it's a little bit different. They generally will, someone will light it for you, and you just sort of take little sips, sort of like
the
that
Toad DMT,
until your lungs are full, doing that, and then you just take one more and just hold it, and then it's very, very quick. It's just like, for me, it's like a white circle of sky just comes towards me, of cloud, and then I'm just like, I just disintegrate, like, and I don't exist, and in some way I do exist. I'm everything. I'm the only thing, and everything is me, and it's the same for like everything is you. This whole world, everything about this is just you. It's and it's so hard to explain. There's no way you could possibly explain this, but it really is. just come to the conclusion this entire universe is one being. And Ram Dass used to say all the time, everything is safe. And I'm like, how can he mean everything is safe? What happens if I get stabbed? But it is because, that's the experience you had, and then you died or you didn't die, and it hurt the body or it didn't hurt the body. And then like you're in this, it's all safe. It's safe to die. Everything is safe. Like it's all part of the experience. It's meant to occur this way. We're meant to have these experiences, and it's beyond us to really understand. At a certain point, that's where the faith comes in, because you just had to believe that this is what this experience is meant to be. But I think we all really we need the time and space to contemplate this.
Yeah.
Which is going to ask. You're going to ask me about what I meant about everything happening all at once. Right now that I've said
you said
space.
This is a quote: "Time is probably a fucked up, reactivated experience of all existence, which probably happened all at once." That was literally the text you sent me.
Yeah, that's sort of like my feeling about it, is that you'd ask me something, and I'm like, well, I think it's because, everything probably happened at once in just this one moment, and this is like the after effect where we're all just. Because I've seen you post that Alan Watts quote. There is only the moment. That's all you will ever experience is right now. This is what you're experiencing. For whatever, I'm sorry, you're listening to me. Why? This is your entire moment right now.
Yeah.
And that's what it is. And you're never not in the moment.
Yeah, that's.
There is no future. There is no past. It's all right now.
There's another quote, and that's a very Gnostic view of things, because the Gnostics believed that when you got up to that higher realm, everything is a reflection. The watery light, everything is a reflection of itself. You have these angelic beings looking at you, and they're seeing themselves, and you're seeing yourself within those angelic beings, because we're all divinity and we're all one. And that, when you really think about that, it's like, it kind of makes your head hurt, because it's like, what, and then there's this quote, speaking of Alan Watts, and again, this goes to what I'm saying. Says Jesus Christ knew he was God, so wake up and find out eventually who you really are. In our culture, of course, they'll say you're crazy and you're blasphemous, and they'll either put you in jail or in a nut house, which is probably much the same thing. However, if you wake up in India and tell your friends and relations, my goodness, I've just discovered that I'm God, they'll laugh and say, oh, congratulations, at least you found out.
Yeah.
Again, there's divinity within ourselves, and it's like you see the two. I had an episode about this, about how these cultures, you see different cultures and the value, like the Indians, they see everything as a deity. Everything in nature is a god, and there is a god for it. And they respect cows, but versus us over here, we slaughter cows and we kill them and we do all these cruel things to them. It's like that oneness with nature, it's lost over here. And I feel like, these people down there, like in South America, how you're saying, they're doing all these rituals and stuff like that, or these ceremonies, and you become one, because we are everything. And when you look at a globe from outer space, there are no lines on the map. It's all.
There actually really are no boundaries.
No, there's not. We put those there. We drew the lines on the map, and it's like, nature doesn't see that, doesn't see the borders. Nature doesn't hate. Nature is nature, and it can seem cruel sometimes. But imagine if we weren't on the earth and there was only animals. There wouldn't be evil. Why? Because evil is what we make it to be, and good and evil is what we define it to be. These constructs, what is good and what is evil anyway. Because when nature is nature, it's just obviously it can be cruel, it can seem cruel, but survival of the fittest.
And I mean, sometimes animals are petty for sure, but yeah, no, I I see what you mean, and we are, in a lot of ways, I feel like we're a consciousness experiment. Let's see what happens as the consciousness inside the material that everything's made out of grows. And it may end up that this time around it's a failed experiment. I think it's one of the things that religion struggled with a lot, back in the day, was this they tried to assert that we weren't animals, we were above animals, everything was here for us. But I think part of that came because they were really trying to find a way to separate ourselves from the base instincts of, fighting, killing, all that sort of anger and rage and, stealing and all these things that, aren't compatible with harmony. I think, at some point they tried to find a way to separate ourselves with that. And there's really, it's going to have to be some kind of evolutionary process. We can't just separate ourselves from that.
Yeah, it's funny you said that's a failed experiment, because I was talking to somebody yesterday about we're talking about the Book of Enoch, and when the Watchers started to come down and insert themselves into the daughters of men, what they call them.
Right.
They started, they created the Nephilim, the Elohim, and the giants. And when they started to insert themselves, they were just fucking everybody. They were fucking the women, everybody. They were fucking the animals. And when they started to insert themselves into the animals, they started to create these.
Bit like Florida.
Yeah, exactly, the Florida man. So he started creating all these abominations, these chimeras, and that's in mythology, that's when you see the minotaurs, the harpies. You could even go as far as saying Bigfoot, that they're just descendants of the Nephilim. And when that happened, God, Yahweh, El, whatever you want to call him, got angry. Because why? Because the Watchers that were designed to watch over us and watch operations, they were intruding in the experiment.
Not supposed to interfere.
Yeah, they were ruining the experiment, and that's when you have him do the flood and all that and wiped everybody out, because this experiment, it got away from him, and that plays into, are we in a simulation? Is DMT that thing? Have you seen the dome? When you look up, do you see the dome when you're on DMT?
I have seen, yeah, that sort of dome with like the alcoved sections, like the almost hourglass, but not full hour, like half hourglass.
Yeah, just like
sections.
a dome. It's like you're breaking out of the simulation.
Goes all the way up, and the dome I was in had the Eye of Ra in the alcoves, except it was in like a Nepalese, like Tibetan style. It's really interesting.
Yeah, it's like you're breaking out of the simulation, for just 1 second and seeing outside of that.
There's a lot of like sometimes in like the computer world where there's like a green framework to stuff where
the
like
Matrix.
You're well, not like, but there's like you're creating
like Tron.
Well, say you're creating like an object, so you create like this green net that's just like lines that represent this object, but it's like green and it's a tetrahedron or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I've seen like that net like in the ayahuasca space, like those lines exist like around everything. So some weird stuff.
What do you think about that, about us being in a simulation? Obviously you have these big physicists, like you have Elon Musk.
You
have all these other guys.
I don't know. It's funny. I actually talked to Rack about that a while ago, and he hates that idea. I think, to put it kind of mildly. I don't object to it. I don't really know. In some ways, it makes sense. In some ways, I think that existence, everything itself, is just kind of a test run. It's just, or not even like a test run. It's just like, let's see what this is. I don't know whether I'd call it a simulation, but I don't know. It could entirely be a simulation that's being run for some other, purpose. I mean, the possibilities really are endless. I'm a fair believer that there's, sort of like it's quite possible there are all these sort of, alternate timelines. I don't see why that's not possible. I mean, all these things are quite possible, it seems to me.
Yeah. Yeah, and I believe in that as well. That, and again, the reason I said The Matrix, because I had never really watched the movies. It's something that you turn on and you just have on in the background. I've never really watched them, and I binge watched all 3 of them this past weekend.
I haven't seen them probably
You never seen it? Well, it's
No,
a
I've
lot of
seen him. I haven't seen him in like 8 or 9 years though.
oh
Probably.
yeah, it's a lot of symbolism in them, and I just wanted to understand the symbolism. But you have, every it's very Gnostic in a way, Christianity kind of thing. You have the Savior, the One, Neo, Neo, and then you have Trinity, and you have Morpheus, and then when you sit down and you Google all the characters' names, their ship was named Nebuchadnezzar.
Right.
Um, Morpheus, the god of dream and sleep or something like that, and then Niobe. Uh, it just it I can't help but think of this, what we're in now. It's like he had to wake up either the red pill or the blue pill. Which one are you gonna choose? Imagine that that was true. If you know we approached the singularity and machines took over and they were just using us, for power or whatever, whatever it was. Can you imagine that? Like just, waking up and being like, hey, dude, I can break you out of here. And then finally breaking out and just
It'd
like,
be weird, but I have actually woken up with my face like pressed into the grill in the corner of the room out of a toad experience. So
what?
I mean, people tend to move around. Some people don't. I have a very good friend. He's a lovely guy. He's a mestizo shaman from Peru, and he came to California about a year and a half ago. And while he was here, my toad facilitator was also here, and I thought, oh, I'm going to introduce these two guys. And my shaman, Weira, he'd never experienced Bufo before, Toad, so he got to have his first experience, and it was so interesting to him. He went again a second time. He broke through immediately. That guy is just so amazing. But he didn't move. He lay down on that bed, and I was sitting there prepared, like if he, moved or threatened, because they don't know what they're doing. They're not in their body, so you have to, kind of look after people sometimes. And
Really?
yeah, he didn't move at all. But me, like I wake up in the corner of the room with my face pressed into the fire grate or something. And I've had this talk actually with my facilitator, because he's like, I think you're trying to move away from the medicine. I'm like, no, it's because my back is really bad. And when I'm in this state, and this happens to me with ayahuasca too. Generally, my first ayahuasca session, all my muscles contract and relax, contract and relax, contract, because it's releasing all that tension. And like I personally, when I'm in my body, I don't know how to do that. When I'm not in my body knows how to do that. It'll get rid of all that tension while I'm not conscious, like when it's in control. But while I'm doing that, I am literally like fishing around, like on the floor. I look like I'm having some kind of, seizure or stroke, but it's not. That's not what's happening to me at all. But I've had like the first time I woke up with like my facilitator, like holding my shoulders down. And I was like, okay, don't just let me go next time, because I'm okay. Just make sure like I don't roll into an actual fire.
Yeah, it's like what was that one drug where the dude fell out from the second story window? I think it was salvia or something like that.
Yeah, a friend of mine years ago, I think probably 10 or 12 years ago, was actually my roommate at the time, or my housemate. He had gotten some salvia, and he's like, hey, do you want to? And I was like, oh, okay, sort of interested. And I watched his experience, and he went first, and he smoked the salvia on this little ottoman, and he pushed himself into the ottoman. He was fighting the ottoman, and it was kind of ugly. And I was like calling his name, and he wasn't responding. And then at a certain point, after a couple of minutes, 5 or 10 minutes or something, he stopped moving, and then he stood up, and he walked across the room, and I'm like, I called his name. He didn't answer me. He went over to his DVDs, and he just started organizing his DVDs. And I'm, let's pretend his name is Tim. I'm like, Tim? Like there's nothing. He just sat there and like organized his DVDs. He had no idea I was there. He wasn't here. He wasn't present. And then like when he came back, he's like, why am I over here? And I'm like, I don't know.
He's like, man, that was great. Now your turn.
He's like, your turn. I'm like, yeah, I'm good.
Yeah, that's I think Joe Rogan tells a story about somebody he knew, or somebody he knew that knew somebody that on a salvia trip they lived another life. They lived
probably maybe an entire life.
He had an entire life. He had a family, had everything, and then when he came back, it's like you said, combative and like disoriented. And then I had another friend of mine who knew somebody who did a salvia trip. He had another life while on the trip. Got addicted to heroin and came
Wow.
back, and then apparently that guy like some years later got addicted to heroin, like eventually. And can you imagine that dude? Just like
Wow.
he's like, I had
Yeah.
kids, I had a house, I had a wife, everything, and I'm back here again. So it's like,
There are definitely things I'm not interested in, and salvia is one of them, and iboga is another one.
yeah, we talked about Iboga last time, right?
Just I'm not interested in that experience. Like if I got to a point where I felt like I really needed it and there were no other options, I would investigate iboga. But from what I understand, iboga is the best of all of the plant medicines for addiction. But having said that, I know people who've drunk ayahuasca, a couple of times and have never touched alcohol again. I don't know how they've done with heroin or not, but I'm sure there are success stories. But from what I've heard, iboga is really like the cure. But it's also probably going to be the worst 30 hours of your life.
30 hours?
Yeah. Yeah. I had a friend of mine that I met in Peru at an ayahuasca. And he was one of the guys who was like, I think you should try Toad. He called, recommended me because he knew what I was, going through. And if it hadn't been for him and a couple others from that group, I probably wouldn't have tried it. And it's helped me so much. But then, like a month or two later, he went and did the iboga thing. And I was like, how was it? And he goes, oh, he said it was like, he's like, I'm glad I did it, but it was the worst 30 hours of my life. I was like, 30 hours. Yeah, I'm good. I'm good.
Yeah, that's because for those that don't know, Iboga is used for what, contacting the dead. Like,
Yes, it's a very much like a crossing over. People experience like paralysis a lot, like they can't
uh,
move, or sometimes for a really long time. I think Graham Hancock, even in the book Supernatural, I think he has a description of his iboga experience, which also sounded horrible. And I have a couple other friends who've tried it, and like I haven't heard one person go, "It was just so beautiful, like I'm so happy." Like I've never heard anybody say anything like that about iboga. It's always like, "Oh my god." And, I've had enough intense experiences with other stuff that I feel like I had one ayahuasca experience, one that was I saw my death in about 40 different lifetimes, including this one. And
wow.
it was a
Including
really,
this one.
including this one. And it was a really long and hard night. And I'm really grateful that I went through it because, like, obviously it was people have started to cotton on to, like, one of my issues is death, dying, death, this whole thing. What is it? And I really got that. I was never concerned about that until like watching my dad die, and it was his concern, and then it became sort of my concern. Um, but yeah, I had a number of very interesting deaths. I think the most interesting death I experienced was I was actually because I was male in some of these, I was female in some of these. In this experience, I was actually I was like a tribal queen. And I had somehow convinced everybody else in the tribe that I was like, born of God. I was way better than all of them. They were little mouth breathers looking after me, and I had someone to do everything for me. I didn't actually do anything. There was someone who fed me, cleaned me,
Yeah.
trimmed my nails, all that stuff, until the enemy came over the hill with the spears. And like, the butt wiper was dead, the hair cutter was dead, everybody else had run away, and I couldn't even like lift a weapon. I couldn't do anything. I was completely useless. And I was, slaughtered. That was interesting. And
This is
I
on
actually, this is
ayahuasca?
ayahuasca, yeah. And
What the
I
fuck, dude?
saw, that was an interesting night. I confronted a large anaconda, and uh, you know, my death in this lifetime, I died alone in a small hotel room in a foreign country. Didn't seem to have, I very much got the feeling I didn't have a pot to piss in. And the message that I got from it was that it didn't matter at all. There was nothing important about that whatsoever. It was a real bad day for housekeeping, but like other than that, like there wasn't a ripple like in the pond. Like none of these things really matter.
Luke, that's fucking deep, dude.
Yeah.
Like, wow.
But it was hard. It was almost, and I mean that in a like a mentally physical way. Like it actually, the pressure on my head felt hard. And I was done at that point. I'm like, I'm not going to do any more ayahuasca. And I had a long discussion with the shaman. He's like, no. He's like, you took too much and you'll be okay. I'm just going to cut you. And I'm like, no, I'm done. We're doing 5 sessions and that was the third. And the first 2 had been hard. And the third was just so brutal. And everybody else was like, I saw Mother Ayahuasca and she held me, and I'm like, for fuck's sake. Anyway, it's just so brutal. And so I sat the 4th one out. And then I was like, I should just do the 5th one. And the shaman, he said, I'm going to cut you down to a 1/4 cup. And immediately, my ego started waving its dick around and was like, a 1/4 cup. Like I might as well just sit in my room and read my book, But I was like, nah, just go drink your 1/4 cup, you pussy. And so I did. I went to the ceremony, drank that, and that 1/4 cup was like 10 hits of acid, easy. I mean, it was so intense, and I was like, wow, I've been drinking 4 times that every time. Like, no wonder, like, I'm taking a battering. Like, I really needed to dial myself in more on the dosage. And the shaman at that time, he's dead now, and he just had a motorcycle accident, and he was going through a really hard time himself, and he wasn't really dialing people in, that he wasn't really quite with it like he had been prior to that. And I'm not criticizing him at all.
Yeah.
It's a very, very difficult job. In fact, the first time I went to Peru to go and do ayahuasca and Vilca and Wachuma and all this stuff, and I thought, sitting in the jungle, I'm like, this is so amazing. And I hadn't done it yet. And I'm like, maybe I'm supposed to be a shaman, So, as we all do, like the ego kind of thing. And I drank the first time. I was like, absolutely 100%. Fuck that. Like there's no way as a shaman, you've got to drink that sort of stuff a lot. You got to get to a point where I'm like, there's no way. I mean, most of these shamans have drunk, more than 1,000 times easily.
Are they on it while they're doing the ceremony, or
some are? It depends on their tradition. Like the Quechua shamans I drank with, they drank a different plant called camalonga, and camalonga enables them to be sort of half in the spirit world and half out, and it enables them to see supposedly what's going on with you in that spirit world, so that they can interfere or intervene if they need to. But I have drunk with a mestizo shaman who is amazing. I was actually just telling you about him that I had the toad experience with, and he drinks with you, and he's just unbelievable, really an unbelievable shaman. So it just it just depends where you are.
They're blasted with you.
sometimes, but the amazing thing was like because they sing and they do all this other stuff during the ceremonies, and I was used to the Quechua shamans. There were 3 of them, and they would sing the Icaros for 10, 15 minutes, and then they'd stop for 5 minutes, and then they'd start a new one and stop for 5 or 10 minutes, start a new one, and through like 4 or 5 hours. When I drank with Weira, he sang the whole time. He never stopped. 5 or 6 hours. He was singing. He had the leaf bundle that he was keeping rhythm with in one hand, and I forget the name for it, and he had like a rattle in the other. And he would be keeping perfect rhythm with those while singing. And then he would sing his purging songs, his cleaning Icaros, and he would be purging with us, and he wouldn't lose the rhythm. He'd be like singing, and then he'd be like, whoa, like this, and the rattle's still going and the leaf's still going. And, there was a point where I had to get up and find the bathroom and leave. And then I'm trying to find my way back, and he's still singing. He comes over, he's got his arm around me, leads me over to where I'm supposed to lay down, lays me down, never stops singing. The leaf bundle never stops. The rattle never sleeps. The guy's amazing. Really amazing.
Wow. Dude, you fucked me up with that story of you seeing yourself die, man. That's...
Look, that was an extremely difficult night. It was probably one of the most difficult things I've ever experienced. And it really started because that was the night too. Like everybody fears the purge from both ends simultaneously.
Yeah.
And at that place they have, the Maloka's sort of in the middle, and they built the rooms around the Maloka where you have the experience. And ayahuasca's always done at night. And the way they have it set up is they have helpers there that stay outside the Maloka, and you're not really supposed to make any noise. Like the shaman, you can, but the shaman's like, if you think you have to make noise, remember that you don't really have to, and that other people are really deep in their meditative state. And if you're making a lot of noise, it can pull them out. A lot of places aren't like that. They're like, make whatever noise you want. And it's like it's a madhouse. But, this place is they kind of encourage you to sort of stay quiet. But one thing you're allowed to say is baño. Like if you need to go to the bathroom, they know you're disoriented and you're going to have a really hard time finding your way to your room. So they have these helpers. They have tiny little flashlights. You say Banyo, they come find you and they take you to your room and they wait for you and then they bring you back. And so that night I drank and it came on really fast and it also was going through me really fast. And I knew, like, I don't even have time to say Banyo, because if I wait for that person to come find me, like, I ain't making it to my room.
You're shitting your pants.
Yeah, there's no way. So I just sort of got up and found my room, which is a lot harder than it sounds sometimes. And I was on my way back from I actually did get back to the Maloka, and I had this experience with I got up to go to the bathroom again, and I was on the pathway, which are like above the jungle. They're like these wooden pathways that are like 12 feet above the jungle floor. And it's a bit like the Ewok village, you know? So I'm like on this path, and I come around a corner and there is a giant black anaconda snake. Like the head is like bigger than a football, and it's got these glowing yellow green eyes, and it's looking at me, and it stopped and I stopped, and its head's like 3 feet off the ground, you know? And for some reason I thought, right, if I just stamp my foot, it's going to like, you know, slither away. It'll be like, oh, whoa, and it'll bail. So I stamped my foot. As soon as I did that, it started moving towards me at a really high speed. And like I froze, like I didn't know what to do. And then like there was this weird sound, and somebody had dropped a water bottle, and I wasn't in, I was in the Maloka. I was still lying, you know, on the bed in the Maloka. Like that hadn't actually happened. What? And then I was like, oh, I have to go to the bathroom. So I got up, and that's when I had, you know, I got to the, you know, I spent that night seeing my death across 40 lifetimes anchored to the toilet. And I was about an inch or two too small to like vomit into the sink without leaving the toilet. So it was a real tricky night. And these are the things like when people ask, you know, my requirements for somewhere to do ayahuasca is somewhere where I have my own bathroom, because I don't want to be waiting for somebody. But if I have that, I'm totally okay. I don't really have any other request.
Yeah.
But so that was the night. And I think I was telling you, like, all of my ancestors were there with me. And I'm like, guys, I am in the bathroom. And they're like, you know, they're all there, like going through this experience with me. And I'm like, it's really great. And I'm glad you're here, but I'm in the bathroom. And it was really rough. And I there were a couple times I tried to get back to the Maloka, and they'd start like the Icaros, and I'd be like, oh, and then like I had no strength in my body. I think I might have dragged myself back into my room with my lips at one point. I don't know how I did it, but it was really intense. But I value all of those experiences. I learned something from every single one of those experiences, and I definitely feel like I'm becoming a better person out of it somehow.
Jesus, Luke, that's so intense. I can't even like begin to comprehend that. That's some shit.
Well, you know, the other thing that some places will give you out there is something called Vilca, or sometimes it's called Wilca or Huilca, depending on how they spell it. And it's actually made from the seed of an acacia, no, not an acacia tree, a mimosa tree. And they take the seed and they toast it, and they grind it up and they mix it with lime or ash, something to make a really fine powder. And then you snort it. And this place, you snort it through the finger bone of like a 300-year-old finger bone of a monk that came from Chavin Temple. I mean, it's just, you know what I mean? Holy cow. And I think I might have told you this last time. But
yeah, we weren't on the air.
Yeah, we were sitting in the Maloka, and they've got the Masada set up, which is like this T-shaped altar with all this hanging stuff behind it. There's all these skulls all over the altar, and these, you know, powerful rocks and objects. And you do this sort of walking meditation around. The Wachumero guides you through this walking meditation as you walk around the Masada. Now you're at this point you're like 14 hours into an intense Wachuma experience, and that stuff is brutal too. It just lasts forever.
That's that form of ayahuasca with all the 5 different types of.
No, Wachuma is San Pedro cactus.
Oh, okay.
So it's San Pedro cactus with whatever additives, you know, they've put in there, because it lasts. With the San Pedro cactus I've had prior to that lasts about 8 hours. This was like never shorter than 18 hours. 18 hours. And
it's similar to ayahuasca?
no, they do it in the daytime, and it's a much more of a physically. They encourage you to move around and get everything flowing, go out and interact, and they take you to meet tribes and interact with people in the jungle.
When you're blasted?
Yeah, and it's very different because it doesn't expand your consciousness to the point where you're having trouble distinguishing stuff. So you can still you have more control over you have more control over your body, but it's a much more intense sort of physical feel. Like there's one guy who just wanted to like go and catch a goat and eat it. It's like wrestled a goat to the ground, and he had like these almost like werewolf like feelings. And I didn't appreciate it at all because I was in this sort of space where like I really wanted stillness. I was going in. I was still in that ayahuasca space where I concentrate in and I don't move. Like I just sit in one position for 5 or 6 hours, or as close as and like my breathing is as small and still as like for whatever reason that's how I feel. I go in, and I still had that need with the Wachuma. I wanted to sit. I wanted to be really quiet. I wanted to focus. I wanted to go in, and like, no, they're like pushing you. But so one of the things we did was go see these, go meet like 3 different tribes and hang out with them. And I was, like I said, the shaman was having a hard time. He'd been in a motorcycle accident and he was physically struggling. And so I was sort of walking with him to make sure if he needed something. And I just sort of, it occurred to me, I said to him, Don Howard, do the tribes people know, that we're on Wachuma? He said, oh, no, they just know that we're really different. And I'm like, well, yes, I mean, I see that, but like, how else are we different? He goes, well, most people, if they come out this far, they'll come to meet the tribe, they'll buy a few trinkets, they'll be here like 5 to 10 minutes and they're gone. He's like, we show up, we talk to everybody for a little bit, then we don't really say much, and we just kind of wander around and we just sit and touch stuff. And he's like, they know we're different, but they don't know why. Like, yeah.
And these are these tribes that are like, they don't have any technology at all, or like are they a little bit civilized?
Some of them, it depends on how they want to be. Some of them live very rudimentary, huts, yurts, malokas. And I live in they fish the river and they do all that stuff. But some of them also, interact in the world. Some of them have jobs to create income to bring back to the tribe as well. And some of them leave and don't come back. And some of them leave for a little while and, sort of do like a half life. Yeah. So there's, it's really kind of up to them. Some of them are a lot more isolated and traditional than others.
That's incredible.
But the Vilca is, that's the one that has it's the 3 different kinds of DMT in it. It has the 5-MeO, the NN-DMT, and also has the 5-HO DMT.
That's what you snorted.
That's what you snort. And it's like Iboga, what the shaman tell you is this is used as the bridge between life and death. And he said, look, you may see relatives that have passed, or people, that have passed, and blah, blah, blah. And he sort of prepared me. So you're sitting, it's dark. You're like 14 hours into this Wachuma experience, the last Wachuma experience, and you're sitting around this Masada with all these skulls and objects.
and the cherry on top.
And, the monk finger bone in this pile of powder, and the shaman, and he would lay it on a little bit. He'd be like, this is, the bridge between life and death. And he said, I'm not going to lie to you. Sometimes people don't come back. So he just sort of like dropped that on the group as you're sitting there. And then he said, no, so, who wants to go first? And I'm like, me. Like, I just leapt up there because I'm like, there's no way I'm going to sweat over not coming back watching like 20 other people like go first. Like, if I don't go now.
Yeah. That way you don't know nobody else came back.
Yeah. And I had never snorted anything else in my life. I'm not into any of I'm into the plant medicine, the psychedelic stuff. That's it. I'm not interested in anything else. But so I'd never snorted anything in there. You're supposed to take 2 full pulls, whatever. Yeah, 3 finger loads like in each nostril. And I'm like, I was so sketched by it. I was like, I'm just going to do 1. And then I think one of them didn't I didn't get the full amount in one nostril anyway, but I wasn't really sweating it. And so I went back to my room and lay down because it takes about 15 minutes to kick in. And just all of a sudden there was this really bright light, and I thought the light in my bathroom had come on, and it turned out actually this light was emanating from my chest. And it was the first time like I'd seen this incredible, really beautiful light that was inside me. And I realized that we all have this beautiful light inside us, but I actually have it too. And I'm really hard on myself a lot. I've been hard on myself a lot, and like recognizing that was a huge breakthrough for me. And suddenly I was in the cosmos, and I was an embryo, and I was just in the stars with all those beautiful multicolored gas clouds, green and blue and pink and purple, and all the stars and everything around. And then there was this spinning disc that appeared out of nowhere in front of me, and it was very Aztec or maybe Mayan looking. It had a design on it that I can't quite remember. And through the design, there were these serpents of light, multicolored light, that were sort of slithering or swimming through the design, lighting the design up, like as they went through it. And I realized I was supposed to step on to that platform. And so I stepped onto the platform, and I was in a room. It had a black and white checkered floor and a table and a bunch of chairs. And these chairs were like alcove chairs, like they have a side and a top, so you could like sit back in them and be either in the shadow or not be seen. And there were people in these chairs and in the room, and they were elders. They were Aztec or Mayan. They were indigenous elders, and they all stopped what they were doing and looked at me. And I looked at them, and then like my foot dropped to the side, and like I took a breath, and I was back in my body, like on my bed. And I wish now that I'd done like the 2 full nostrils for that experience, but it is what it is. And it was a good experience. But the end of last year, when that Wachumero died, the guy who took over told everybody one of Don Howard's last experiences with Vilca that he had talked about.
That's the shaman that died.
The shaman that died. And he described his Vilca experience where he went into this room, and this guy described the room that I had been in perfectly. Like I recognized that room. And he said, and all the elders were there, and they had made this great glittering robe of many colors. And they told him, your robe is almost ready. And that was like his last Vilca experience. And what blew me away was he described that room, and I had been in that room. I don't know how you make this stuff. Like it's the imagination drug. I don't know how you make it up. I don't know I don't know how you get different people to imagine, radically different people to imagine exactly the same surroundings or being. I have no answer for that.
That's so incredible. Luke, dude, I could talk to you for hours about this. And I'm so glad that I got to record all of this, because these stories, man, these experiences that you've had, again, that's, not saying that I'm going to snort something out of a dead monk's finger, but, it's like it makes you think, like you said, like you saw that room, he saw that room. It just really makes you think, is there more to what we see than, is there more to what we can see? Because, the eyes can only see 0.003 of or 0.0025 of the light spectrum. Imagine all these things that we can't see in this thing. These things going on. Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely, the same things occupying the same space as you are right now. Mm-hmm. You're just not aware of it.
Mm-hmm. And like we were talking about the nebulas. That's why I always post a quote, with the backdrop of a nebula or something like that, because I find that so fascinating. And I think we can wrap it up with that, Luke, dude. And
sure.
We can, man.
Don't worry, man. If you ever find yourself stuck for a guest sometime and I'm around, just hit me up, because we didn't even really get into like toad and reactivations and things like. There's a lot of stuff we could talk about.
Yes, and I'm really hoping that I was telling you at the beginning that I almost have the fiance convinced, so we turned it from what I didn't say was, I told her about getting married there. She was like, well, maybe we don't have to get married there, but we can go,
Mm.
as a trip. So I was like, fuck yeah, I'll still take that. So it's like you said, if we do go, we could do like a episode over there,
Yeah. And we could even do, like, if you wanted, we could do like some kind of Egyptian pre-marriage ceremony or something, so that you can have something to celebrate what you're going to do when you come back, or however.
Yeah. Yeah, that'd be dope. But one more time for the people, Luke. I know I enjoy the fuck out of these conversations, and I love how
I very rarely get to have these conversations, so it's nice.
Plug in your info so people can look at. This is going to be and I'm going to split this up into two parts. This is going to be the end of the second part. So the first part, we're going to do it,
Right.
Egyptian stories, breaking down these Egyptian sites that we talked about.
Yeah, one day we're going to have to get to South America and Central America, because there's a lot of interesting stuff there too. We never even really got into that stuff. So.
We can do that in a couple of weeks, next week, whatever.
I was going to tell you about the Red Chapel too. We didn't get to do that. Oh, there's so much stuff.
So many things.
You know what? Just see if people actually like it, and then if they like it, we come back, do more.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I love it. I don't go fuck what the people think.
Right on.
So plug in your information one more time,
sure,
Luke, so we can find you.
You're not going to really find too much plant medicine stuff. It's mostly the archaeology stuff, but it's enigmasoftheancient.world is my website that has my tour information and other stuff there, and videos that I've done, links to it. So you can get a link to my YouTube account, which is Enigmas of the Ancient World. And you might have to kind of poke around on YouTube. It's a bit weird. And then I'm on Instagram, Enigmas_of_the_ancient_world. And I've got a Facebook page, Enigmas of the Ancient World. You can find me if you really want to. And actually, if you go to enigmasoftheancient.world, there's a link there to my Instagram and Facebook page. So maybe that's a good place to start.
I have always the links to that in the description of the episode as well. But I want to thank you for coming on today, Luke.
Thanks for having me.
We'll probably chat a little bit here after this.
Yeah.
But thank you, Luke.
Sure. Anytime, man.
Oof. Well, there you have it. That got pretty deep, and he just blew my mind with some of those stories. But make sure to check out his work on YouTube and his website. Also, make sure to follow us on social media at the Juan on Juan Podcast. Shoot me an email if you want to be on the show, if you have anything interesting to talk about. The Juan on Juan Podcast at gmail.com. Once again, thank you for the support, and until next time.